Hello there, my name is Jason Boswell from OpenText and welcome to the Technical Awareness webinar. This is for version 2602, which is we're in the second quarter of 2026, and this release is about core data discovery and risk insights. As always, I'll take you through some of the new features and the use cases and how to best make use of those new features. So as always, let's start with looking at the schedule. This is the 2602 schedule, and it was released from engineering late April, and the demo system has been updated. So everything that I'm describing today, if you have availability of a demonstration tenant, you should be able to go ahead and try some of these things out. Of course, these dates are in the future. These are the provisional dates for our operations team to deploy onto the production tenants and the availability for software download for our on-premise customers. So those dates are there for your information, but these dates will be officially announced when you get notifications about these dates, and this will come directly from the operations team. Okay, so let's continue on and look at the highlights of this release. So this release includes new features and customer enhancement requests. It is available to both our cloud SaaS customers and our self-hosting customers. So you notice there was a provisional date for the software download, so this is available to them. Our sovereign cloud customers go on a 12 monthly cycle. So for the ones that are on the sovereign cloud, they will do their updates in 2604. The highlights of this release, there are basically three major highlights. The first one is a new feature to allow the protection of files at source within the file system and SharePoint by applying masking rules to existing documents. Now, we had a similar feature called Send to Target in the previous release. So in that way, we could mask files as we are sending them to be declared to a new location. But a number of customers asked for us to protect files at source. So this is replacing the existing files at source with protected versions. And we also added more flexibility to do with the masking rules. So you can do a lot more flexibility, have different types of policies you can apply. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We have a new core adapter for Confluence. So we've had some customers have using this as a custom adapter previously. Now this is provided as an out-of-the-box adapter. And the feature that we've had in the product, and it's for some of the, which is pretty useful, is about capturing external metadata. That wasn't available for Content Manager previously, and I think this is quite useful for content managers to capture some of the non-core fields as they're important. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into that item. Okay, so let's now drill down into the detail of each of these use cases. So first of all, this is the new mask at source feature. So this new feature allows you to mask, so that they're using the same grammar rules, and you can see them on the right hand side here that we have. So such as financial data, contact data, we've got government data, driving license, any of those existing grammar rules that you have inside the product. You can now cherry pick those and then make a particular rule. So an example on the right hand side here, I'm going to mask just the financial details. I'm not too bothered about the email addresses, but I want to make sure financial details are removed from these existing source documents. And this is going to make when we apply this rule to mask those financial details, we're going to do that at source, okay, with those masked versions in the original format. Now, there are some limitations I'll talk about in a second, but in terms of the formats, the key is that this is done at the source locations. The new mascot rules, you need to enable them. First of all, you need to enable this configuration. So this is with inside Connect, and inside Connect, you will be able to create a new in Protect. You share in protection details. You can then create a new rule, and this new rule, you use this internal masking system here. So the inside of a system, there will be automatically be an internal masking system that will be available for you to use. And that internal masking system basically references the existing grammars and the existing grammar patterns and masking patterns that you've defined against those grammar rules. Once you've then created this as a new rule, then you need to enable that rule on your workspace. So you can either edit an existing workspace or a new workspace, or more likely, you will be able to edit a workspace template. And notice this is quite useful because it means that as administrators, you can kind of create these policies against the workspace templates. So the workspace templates generally are linked to a business process, and it enables you to kind of default. These are the types of, for this type of workflow process inside this workspace template, I would like the users to use this particular rule or that particular rule. So you can turn on the ones that you want your users to be using. So I think that's quite useful. So that's part of the setup. Then let's go talk a little bit about the execution now. So now I'm actually with inside a workspace, and the masking at source rule can be applied to documents with inside a workbook. So inside a workbook, I can hit the protect button. And previously in protect button, and our option was the Microsoft Purview system to apply protect rules. Now you can apply our OpenText internal rules. And this is the rule this one that I created on the previous slide, the mass financial details. And this would take these details out of the documents. After your definition, you've picked the rule, it presents you with a summary and a little bit of a warning because this is an irreversible action. We're actually overwriting the existing file. So if this is a document which is important, you keep the original one. We recommend you do some other action. Maybe you send this to your corporate record system if this is official record, and then keep that as the original in there, and then just mask the one in this open location. It will give you some warnings. So in my example here, it could do all 5 of the documents. We support all of the Office formats, but the XML-based Office format. So if you're using previous binary versions of the Office formats, the .docs rather than .docx, then these will be skipped. So it covers the majority of the kind of common Office formats that are used and text formats that are used, but if the other formats will be skipped, but it'll show you that they'll be skipped in this area here. Once these files are then protected, so we actually take that data, edit the documents, take those sensitive details out, replace those entities with mass data, this document is then tagged as protected, and you can see inside the metadata, you can see when it was protected, what system it used, and what rule was applied to protect those documents. So this is useful from a reporting point of view. You can go back and see how much of my data is now protected now. That's quite a useful thing to show on some of the workspaces. And in terms of reporting, you see that hopefully you'll see more of your data is protected over time as you find insensitive data and taking the appropriate action. Okay, so again, I think this is an area of the product we'll continue to work on. I think there's some new stuff we're working on at the moment to make send mask follow the same rule-based process as we have with masking at source, and you'll see more to do with this feature coming on in the new releases. Okay, moving on. There's a new core adapter for Confluence. Now now you can register Confluence as a source, and you can register them as data sets, and you follow the same pattern. You can see my Confluence data set configuration on the right here. Notice you can define the configuration in terms of Confluence. They call them spaces, and you can define the list of spaces that you want to cover. I think it's up to a maximum of 500 spaces in one particular data set. And then it will, in terms of the hierarchy, it will go down the hierarchy of all the documents within inside that space and below it. When viewing the content list, you'll be able to review it by the folder tree. So that as you'll be able to see the structure of that. And in terms of deletions, we do track deletions, but we do this by comparing what's in the current scan against what was existingly scanned. We have support now for external metadata capture for Content Manager. Now, the reason we added this, and this was a request from a number of customers, so you can use the dynamic part of the external metadata capture, which uses the external metadata file processor at the agent level. And the reason we did this is to give you ability to capture extra metadata from CM that we don't normally do. So, and as you can see on the right hand side here, this is a document in Content Manager that I analyzed, and I've got the unique identifier and the record number, but a lot of the metadata is stored at the container level, such as the classification here. So the classification field wasn't applied directly to this document, which is a common thing with inside Content Manager. So the ability to add extra metadata, which I've shown you on the left-hand side here, is the ability to capture extra information such as the record container URI, the container record title, the actual classification of the container. So this document sits in that container inside that classification. And then anything else you want to do, additional fields, retention schedules, because often retention's controlled at the folder level. So, and I've showed you an example here of, this is inside, there's a PowerShell script that's part of external metadata capture, and you reference that inside the dataset configuration. And here I've expanded on the default example that you get out of the box to show you how to get example information from the container. So this basically makes calls to the service API here. I get the container record URI, and I use that to make an extra call here to get the container file details. So when we get those extra metadata details, I'm able to get the actual extra metadata from the container record object. Now, of course, this has got to make not just one call, but it's got to make a second call to the service API. So this will slightly slow down the ingestion process from Content Manager, but it does give you the ability to capture this extra metadata. If you want to get an example of this script, just send me an email. I'm quite happy to send you this example, but it's fairly straightforward for those that are fairly experienced in the Content Manager Service API. Okay. As always, we do updates of the grammars with every release. And there was some comments that in terms of Australia is that we counted the Australian company number, the ACN, so it will no longer match as a SSN tax ID because the ACN is considered public information. And so we've taken advantage to not put that inside the grammar set. So it still will be captured, but it's not part of the standard grammar set. But this, if you want to take advantage of that, you do need to, because this is a change to the grammar set, you do need to reanalyze your data if you want to apply that to existing data. And there are some updates, as you can see here, for different countries and different grammar entities. Some other further enhancements, when editing the default action on a dataset from metadata to analyzed, you can now enable these further options. I'd recommend you kind of look at these options. These options are actually critical in terms of how you analyze the data and what is stored. So it's important. These particular options look like small radio buttons, but they are key to how you should scan your data. We generally recommend for large ones is that there's no reason to store all the content as text. Only in particular use cases would you actually store the content as text, but sometimes you do need to extract the grammar values. The second one here, the retry function. Now the retry function, if a job was separated up into multiple job runs, so basically you got a large scan that's broken up into smaller job runs, Then you had to go into the individual job runs to hit retry. You couldn't do a retry on the whole thing, and that has been fixed. When displaying the workspace overview dashboard, if you were limited in what you could see, it showed you there was a 0 count there, which was a bit. It didn't really show you what exactly was actually correct in the system. So, and these cards are now hidden if it's a 0 count. In terms of user management, now you can remove yourself from application level roles if you've got the permission to do so. And the Microsoft data protection type has been basically just renamed according to how it's commonly known now. In terms of defects and API updates, the defect list, just come have a look in the release notes. There's a number of defects that are fixed in there, and if it relates to an issue that you had, I recommend you check those. And as with anything, there's some number of API changes that relate to the functionality within inside the product. So I think that takes us pretty much to the end. Thanks very much for taking time to listen all the way through here, and I'll speak to you on the next release. Bye for now.